just wish, don't you? But Mr. Mammah, well, he's here to take us through the dailies. Mr. Richard Mammah, good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning.
I mean, sometimes you take a look at the headlines in Nigeria compared across West African papers. Why does it always look as if we were always at everybody's throat over here when you look at our headlines? Not really nice and easy compared to some of the West African countries, maybe. Maybe the Francophone ones. I did that comparison once and I thought, oh dear, well, you got to know something is happening in this country. But then, let's start with leadership. They start on a political note. I mean, having looked at how INEC going on with the activities, several things about registration, the CVR going on. So the leadership comes up today with the kind of headline, not the businessy like some of the other ones. Let's see it, guys. And so the front page there says, leadership newspaper, well, PVC registration deadline. That's what this is about. As INEC registers 2.8 million in 1 month, pressure mounts for extension. Well, you never wrote that out. People always ask for an extension. But at the moment, INEC says they're done with that. What do you think of it?
I think I can appreciate the two sides of the discussion. When INEC says they are done with registration, they are working around the original timetable they had brought out, and then they are, logistical, thinking. But I think that it's possible to have a win-win for both sides, which means we suggest that yes, you have to process and print the cards and hand them over to the people, and you need some time frame to do that. But you can continue registering people for another 1-2 months, right? In the hope that perhaps the final registrants may not exactly hold their PVC by voting day if you absolutely cannot meet the logistics. Because one day we've got to come to that point where we say everyone that should be registered should be registered. I'm hoping that by 2027, God helping us, right, we will not have this challenge, and that everybody, people can just simply, from their handsets, just the way they transfer and receive money, they could also complete the registration process and print out your documentation.
Is that to suggest that perhaps we shouldn't just limit it to permanent voter cards? For instance, if you are up to 18, if you can drive, if you can transact business, you should have one kind of identity that should also allow you to vote.
You're absolutely spot on. I think the whole mystery about voters' cards in itself, has to be broken. Because a voter's card is one other means of identification. And in this time of technology and biometrics and supportive verification facilities, that mystery has to go.
And we being cash crunch in the country.
Yeah.
So we should reduce where we spend a lot of money as much as possible and streamline these things.
And our paperless objectives,
And we have NIN as well.
Yeah, NIN.
And it has the NIN. Oh boy, that's leadership anyways.
Well, let's take a look at the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. This is what you find. This is on the economy, all right? So we're talking from electoral matters, the politics, to the economy. And this is what you find. Presidency wades into CBN NMPC feud. That's right. Are you wondering what's going on here? The Daily Trust newspaper, well, focuses on that one, on dollar remittance, particularly with riders. Maybe that might give you some explanation. We remitted over $2 billion to our account with Apex Bank, oil firm. How CBN augmented NMPC's $1.6 billion remittance for oil imports. So this is just like out of the blues, right? We just launched the NMPC Limited, still thinking, okay, what's going to happen to, the sector, our remittance, essentially how the operations in that whole sector goes. And we're seeing this one. Presidency wades into CBN NMPC feud. Is this something you probably have been following, or are you as shocked as maybe I am, as other Nigerians
No, I'm not surprised.
Okay.
I was expecting, and I'm still expecting some more, turbulence in terms of this whole process. Because the truth about it is that they say water would find its level. The point is, do you want to deregulate this industry? If you want to, then do it. Because petroleum has become an albatross for us, and it's sad. Because this is our bumper season. We did not call for the Ukraine-Russia war, right? But it happened. You know, just like you had the 1973 issues, right? We've had another one some 40, 50 years thereafter, and we are losing. We're hemorrhaging on account of what is supposed to... Our accounts, our excess crude accounts, so-called, should be brimming, should be busting. We should be lending to nations at high premiums at this point. It's sad. And we had this chance, you know, several years ago to completely deregulate this industry. The former minister, Ibe Kachiku, put a template on the table. He said in 18 months or thereabout, we are going to have walked through this course. Somewhere along the line, some memos started flying around and the whole process was scuttled. Even when we got to PIA, all right, poor political brinksmanship and the whole process again has been extended. We will deal with this issue someday, and we should deal with it today.
But, you know, is this really about deregulation or just the challenge majority of businesses Nigerians are facing with dollar remittance? I mean, just recently we saw Emirates writing that, do I say, is a letter or what to the Nigerian government saying, well, this and this, we've not been able to even repatriate our funds. We try to pay for, you know, the aviation fuel in Naira, and they said no. So there's generally a challenge. People trying to pay for school fees, medical fees, and all of that. And then you keep hearing, we don't have enough dollars. So is this really about deregulation, or just a general state of foreign exchange, you know, the dollar, Naira back and forth, really?
No, I think it's several things. But the deregulation question is a major part of it, because we get the bulk of our foreign exchange, you know, consummate in government terms from the sales of crude. And so that means that the crude comes to the system through the CBN. Now, if the CBN is circumscribed in terms of having to deal with subsidies, have to deal with all the other issues, you know, then you now have a crisis, because the CBN does not have enough to fund, you know, that system. And even when you get to the other issues, as in, for example, education or healthcare, you know, the funds people take for those other ones, those are other failings of a system. The truth about it is that we insist on being a dodgy nation. People confront their problems. They don't run away from it. And this country has to confront its own central challenge, that it has to have a governance model that enables the economic empowerment of its citizens. Governance is about the people. As the people keep growing, so the country gets better.
Quite instructive words there. We need to face our challenges.
Absolutely. Speaking of challenges, it's been said that crude is not diamond, it's not tiny that, you know, you can't find who's stealing. And government says, you know, there's a lot of pipeline vandalism going on. But following the deployment of gunships and, you know, security operatives to the Niger Delta area, and the promise by the Chief of Defense Staff that indeed they were going to rein in on those stealing Nigeria's crude, why has it been difficult for, you know, some results to be seen in that regard? What are your thoughts?
No, it's quite simple. It's the talk is cheap. It's one thing to make the statement, we are going to deal with it, we are on top of the issue. The other reality is that are there sacred cows in the system? And there are. A governor in this country several months back on national television said, hey, XYZ are implicated, you know, in the crude business in my state. There was no investigation. If there was, we haven't seen the report, right? Now, so you get it now again. Someone has to recognize that you need to have a nation for you to even be called a former president or a former head of state of that nation. If you don't, if this crisis at several levels continues to deteriorate and expand, God forbid one day you will not have a nation to refer to.
Because, I mean, it doesn't look as if we really want to tackle this crude oil theft challenge. Because I remember the last government had a committee on this one. So this government came in. What happened to that committee? Well, they disbanded. So do they have their own committee? Nobody's heard anything about some of these things. So if we're losing at that time in the region of 40,000 barrels per day, now they say it's way more than that. So where do we go from here? Who knows?
Who knows why we need committees every now and then. When we have statutory agencies that are meant to ensure security and all of that. A couple of headlines. I'm actually looking for cool headlines, maybe for Chamberlain and our viewers, but really, there's none. Again, airfare spike as Abuja kind of flight costs 135,000.
Not cool.
not cool at all. I can go on and on, but I'll just leave it there for the Daily Trust.
Yeah, but for Daily Independent, there's no cool headline either. So the Daily Independent this morning leads with, the politics of the PDP, and it says, PDP BOT expresses concern over confusion in party. Let's take a look at the riders. Wike Group gives conditions for reconciliation as calls for Iocha Ayu's resignation heighten. There's been some talk about the crisis in the PDP and about how Governor Wike invested heavily in the party, particularly at the time when the party was in crisis and it was headed for an implosion. And he worked hard for the party to stand today, and therefore he should reap the gains of his hard work. So is it beginning to look to you like a sink or swim situation here if, Governor Wike is not appeased? And is this the conversation that really the PDP should be having now ahead of the 2023 general election?
It's a sad turn, but it also returns us to the issue of when you break the edge, the serpent will bite. The PDP has a constitution, and it is expected that organizations that put together constitutions expect to be bound by their constitution. And then the PDP also has to deal with the ground realities of the nation. It has been an opposition party for the better part of 7 years and counting. How has it opposed? Around which principles did it put on the table, to oppose? Because when you deal with things from the point of principle, it's easier to resolve them. The PDP was for a long time being dodgy. People within the party were saying, can we redefine the party? Can we reevaluate? Can we reposition? We were pushed out of office because we made certain mistakes. Can we address those mistakes and resolve them? So when they did not resolve them and kept patching the system on, we're going to get to a day where things were going to come to a head. Now they have come to the head. Unfortunately, it is coming at a very critical point for them, on the eve of another elections. So how they deal with it at this point, is going to be a challenge or is going to be a winner. If you ask for independent counsel, I say go back to original principles, stick with principles, deal with issues. If there are zoning issues in your party, respect them optimally.
Hasn't the horse bolted from the stable?
No, the horses can be recalled if you necessarily need to recall them. But the point is that there are several ways you deal with issues of this nature. And I think that's where you start giving guarantees, documented, firm guarantees, in that sense. There's absolutely nothing that cannot be done. After all, some people won primaries and they announced or they sent letters to INEC that they are not going ahead anymore, right?
But let's be more categorical. Can the PDP move on without Governor Wike?
Of course, every organization can move on without one person, one member, one component. The PDP can, but the PDP is in a hamstrung position. The PDP had Peter Obi, right, who has become a third candidate, in this race. Nigeria has had one candidate several years, and then two candidates, and now we have a 3-candidate race, going even possibly to a 4th. The PDP had Peter Obi. So if Peter Obi had remained in the PDP would not have donated a 3rd candidate to the Nigerian political equation, right? So the PDP moved on without Peter Obi and gave themselves the threat of a 3rd candidate. Now, if they move on without Governor Wike, what configurations would come on subsequently? So I think it's, treading the issues. But for me, it's beyond even winning or losing. It's about the fact that a country must be governed by his best principles, best practices.
So, in other words, you're saying anything can move on from anything, but at what cost? But the thing now is, in the future, will people look to this scenario and say, wait a minute, last time out that this kind of scenario happened, somebody paid, invested heavily, and certain things happened or didn't go the way they thought it should happen. So in future, will politicians now say, look, I'm not going to invest or overreach myself. I will invest within my own immediate circumstance. Maybe if it's in my state, self-preservation first. Then maybe at the national level, whatever happens. But then, you ask yourself, if at the national level you don't have a say at the center, how strong can you be at the wings?
No, you hit the point. If you don't have a stay at the center, now the point is you've got to build a say at the base. and take that say. You know, some of us who have been advocating for restructuring of the federation, that's what we're talking about. A parliamentary democracy is more representative. You know, that's how Awo built his say. That's how Ahmadu Bello built his say. That's how the rest of Okpara and all of them built their say. And then they now took their say to go to the national platform. It's this idea of a nation. A nation does not exist, you know, in the air. A nation exists as an aggregate, you know, of component units. No, so when we keep saying this is the national interest, no. There are subnational interests that are negotiated into a national interest. So it is legitimate to build your say at the base and then to build up from there. The rest of the nation will respond to you on the basis of what you have built at the base. And that is what is natural and logical.
Maybe proportional representation might be interesting at this point. You never can tell.
All right. Somebody's negotiating with his say very much in the PDP now. All right, Malkwe.
Well, thank you, Bukola. And I think The Guardian has more of what that say is about. They have just beneath the nameplate, PDP, Wike demands a use removal single term for Atiku. BOT meets tomorrow. Page 6 is where you find details. I'm just wondering whether you think these conditions are too steep.
Yeah, I would say that, as the PDP people will say, it's an internal affair, it's a family affair for them, you know, because for us in the media, we try to approximate the best interest of the people, of the nation. So let the PDP finish its own discussions and negotiations, you know, as it is. What concerns us, you know, what should concern us and, you know, as a nation in that sense is that you want to get the best for the country, and you want to get the best in terms of the geopolitics, in terms of the economics, in terms of the welfare, in terms of the best practices, you know, that should govern a country. This country has so much potential and should aspire for so much greatness. Now, if the country is not getting it, it means then that fundamentally it begins with politics. So as much as we recalibrate, in a sense, it's interesting what's going on in the PDP, even in the APC with the Muslim, you know, issues and all that. Every country is a product of robust debates. You know, every country. The Americans spent a lot of time debating the American Declaration. You know, the British, you know, built the Magna Carta over a period of time. The people of Singapore. But when you see outcomes 40, 50, 200 years down the line, they are the product of rigor. Rigorous debates, rigorous discussions that are taking place years, decades and generations before. So I think the PDP should engage as robustly as it is in the national interest. Same for all other parties. And at the end of the day, we should have a better democracy and a better nation.
Well, the lead story is bigger than the PDP. It says Nigeria missing as BRICS moves to cut Western domination. That's what you find there. Country on waiting list to join BRICS. Accession talks have not commenced, says diplomat. Country will not meet economic criteria, experts insist. So just in case you're wondering just what the BRICS are about, there's the acronym of countries, first letters: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. South Africa is the only country on the African continent considered in that particular economic aggregation. What do you think will be Nigeria's, what will you make of our plot, or not plot now, I'm looking for the right word to use, our bid to join the BRICS? Do you think that we have what it takes?
You know, this discussion is painful. This aspect of the discussion is painful because we remember that as far back as independence, 1958, 1960, Time magazine was saying that Nigeria was the great African hope, right? The great African hope. Now, if Africa is a quarter, Africa is about 51, you know, 54, 55 countries, which is about a quarter of the United Nations ecosystem. Now, if you are setting up any organization to deal with multilateral negotiations like BRICS, then Nigeria should logically stand in. More so in terms of nominal GDP, in terms of population count, right? We have the numbers, you know, in those terms. So what you have there are governance failings in terms of foreign policy management. That's what you have on the door. Whether it comes with ECOWAS, whether it comes with the African Union, whether it is with the United Nations ecosystem, Commonwealth, and even now, as it has to do with BRICS, it means that we have not pushed our weight, because we have natural weight to push. But weight does not push itself. You've got to drive it. You've got to articulate a framework. If you remember that it was in this same country, Murtala Mohammed, as head of state, went and made a speech, 75, 76, Africa has come of age. And the whole of the world was quaking on account of one speech by one Nigerian head of state. So it's important that we recalibrate as quickly as possible, our foreign policy objectives. You don't need to have everything to have a strong foreign policy. You don't need to have everything, but you need to put it consciously there, because there are variables that we have that should not be kicked away. If South Africa is in the table, why is Nigeria not in the table? So it's important that we deal with it. But I think that part of the problem is that we have actually sunken down to very poor internal politics, which makes it impossible for us to raise our weight and deal with, our position when it comes to the international scene. So the more we fix our internal politics, the more we can lift up our eyes and be able to see that there are vacancies for this nation, there are opportunities for this nation at the global stage. And I think we've got to deal with that even now.
But let's leave it there for the Guardian newspapers.
All right, take a look at Vanguard newspaper next. PDP crisis. Wike's group lists demands as elders meet. Seeks single term from Atiku. Are you stepping down as chairman? NAS leadership, others. BOT, NWC to meet tomorrow. PDP's problem, not as bad as APC's Muslim issue. Ascribed to Walid Jibrin. So that we've already focused on. Let me see. Economic downturn forces Nigerians to abandon 5.7 million bank accounts. So banks, behave yourself, treat your customers right. You don't have too many now. At the bottom straight, bandits block Enugu Port Harcourt highway, burn army van, abduct scores of passengers. Looks like it's coming closer home. If they're blocking roads now, goodness me, what next? And then this also concerns the populace. Minister attacks FG's plan to impose 5% tax on call, text, data. Now, this turns out to be Minister of Communication, Mr. Pantami, who says that they will do everything legally possible to fight this policy, because he says, the paper quotes him as saying, that policy did not go through wide consultation, and if it's allowed to sail through, it's going to affect the sector badly. Wow. Isn't this what people want? Like, don't go through with this. Who knows where this will head? So, is the government divided against themselves now?
I think we should keep this statement for the record, because it would speak in the days ahead.
File this paper wherever you are. Go get one. And then, Mr. and Mrs. I think I'm going to look for trouble this morning. So, Mr. and Mrs. normally. So, Mark, you can imagine how it was raining in Abuja today. But Mrs. is making the similar kind of reference. So, Mrs. says, oh, will this rain stop for God's sake? My makeup cost a fortune. And you almost know where I'm going. And then Mr. says, please, wait till it stops. It will be disheartening to see good money being washed away in different colors. That's my God, this paper today.
By the way, I'm not laughing at the joke. I don't think the joke is funny, so nobody should come for me. I'm just laughing because I love to laugh.
That's after the fact.
I love to laugh. Laughing is good medicine.
No, we'll bear the cost after this.
Take a look at the Nigerian Tribune this morning. And what is on the front page is not funny at all. Even if I wanted to laugh at this, there's nothing to laugh at. ASU extends a 168-day strike by 4 weeks. Parents, students, kick. We don't trust you again, parents tell ASU. Nance wants education minister sacked. It's a page 4 read. Did that surprise you, this rollover strike? It's been rolling over since February 14th, and it's clearly rolling to almost the end of August. What do you think about this?
No, it's painful. It's painful when parents wake up in the morning and see their able-bodied children who, by the grace of JAMB and the system, have been able to get admissions into the public school system, and they are home. You know, it's painful. It's painful. I think that there has been too much irresponsibility. You know, I think that's a simple word to describe it in terms of addressing this. And I think it's because people don't have an eye on the future. A president, or rather a prime minister, stood up in a country some 60 or thereabout years ago and said, you know what, I want to build a country where people will be respectable, where everyone would have their homes, a country, small fishing inlet, you know, a country where the systems would work, that would, you know, compete with the rest of the world in terms of growth, development, advancement. And down the line, that country has remained one of the top-ranking countries, top 10 in the world for the past 20 years and counting. Singapore.
Right.
What are the strategic visions of Nigerian leaders? Oil will run away. Your agric farms do not count in real terms except the value addition that you bring to it. And it begins with education. Any government that education is more important than security.
Right.
Because it's the failure of education. You know, the Boko Haram people came, they started by burning their certificates. Partly because the certificates gave them education that was inadequate, just like Governor Rufai had showed us. Teachers that were not sent for refresher courses and so could not teach. Governor Shomoye also showed us that. You know, so when you have an educational system that is that bad, the first state of emergency you declare is on education, fixing education.
Very, very important point you made there, and we can go on about this, but because of time, we'll definitely delve into this in the coming minutes. Onto the big picture on the front page, 50 feared abducted in Kaduna, 10 in Taraba, Bauchi. And just for mention, first grains ship leaves Ukraine under Russia deal. And people are saying, if you can agree on food, why can't you agree on peace, right? Stop killing. It's a page 2 read at Nigerian Tribune this morning.
And very quickly, let's take a look at the Daily Times newspaper. We were looking for a cool headline, you know, just some minutes ago, and we couldn't find one. I think I was able to look through the papers and found one. It's above the nameplate of the Daily Times newspapers, and it says, soldiers raid Abuja, Niger, Kaduna forests, arrest bandits, destroy their camps. Soldiers arrest, I can't resist it, I must take it again. Soldiers raid Abuja, Niger, Kaduna forests, arrest bandits, destroy their camps. That's a breath of fresh air, and we hope that they're able to build up on these gains, you know, and make more arrests of bandits. But take a look at the big story on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper. Okowa, Baba Ahmed, that's the running mate to the Labour Party presidential candidate, trade words over Obi. Let's take a look at some of the riders. Obi, a neophyte, lacks experience to rule Nigeria, says Delta Governor. Okowa has no idea what capacity is. Obi most qualified for presidency, Baba Ahmed. I'm ready to sacrifice for Nigeria's survival, ex-Anambra Governor. I can't resist the urge to, you know, to continue in that line of thought that I started off with earlier, which we didn't quite exhaust. Why are the politicians talking about these things that are less important than the real issues? Is it the fault of the media now? Are they not asking the right questions?
No, I think that it's not the fault of the media. The media is in the business of information, and so when you make a statement that is what, you know, profiling, the media will throw it out at you. I think what needs to be done is that the citizenry, you know, also have to engage. You know, again, remember also that the ban on politics has not been formally lifted. So there will be more opportunities for discussions, for debates, and it's a long run. You know, I'm impressed that INEC has given us more time to interrogate our candidates, you know, and aspirants and all that, because once they get in there, it's almost impossible to do much to censor them, you know, in that sense. So I think the media is doing its bit, will continue doing its bit, but the point is that as the media keeps doing its work and the citizens keep doing their work, as in, for example, the 10, 12 million people that went out to go and join the voters, you know, tranche, quite impressive. You know, the dominant factor there is the youth vote, the student vote. So there are no more lazy youth. They are engaged youth, you know, and you are going to have a lot more of this, coming on. I think what the media should continue to do is to provide space for all shades of opinion. It's one thing to represent the big man who says something, but we should hear from the small people. Because at the end of the day, every country is a country of its small people.
Well, they can disagree all they want, but at the end of the day, people want to know what will they do to fix the economy, specifically, bottom line. So all the other one is, they can play their politics, but when the chips are down, that's what we want to know. So I have to resist moving forward, because if I don't, time will resist me. Well, thank you for coming on, Mr. Mammah.
Thank you very much.
We will be back in a moment. Don't go away.